just doesn't matter because we're going to be online too. But yeah, if you want to come forward. Do we know if we're live online? I'm going to go with we are. Yes, we are on. So hello to all of you online. We're getting things situated here. We are going to start with the check-in. So if you haven't done the check-in yet and need that code, it's going to be up here for just a little bit longer, especially for those of you online. We have updated the presentation just a smidge. It's not a whole lot different than what you might have access to online. So if you want the new one after we get done, our contact information will be there. Please shoot an email to us so that way we can do it. I'm also going to try to send it to the Behavior Live people and get that done. So with that, my name is Randi Reiman. I'm the Director for Accessibility Services at Lincoln Land. I come to this position with not prepared, with special education background for K-12. I worked as a special education coordinator, a transition specialist, and then most recently I was a principal at one of the districts that I had worked in. So in those roles, I've worked a lot with students of all abilities. Specifically on the autism side, we have worked with students that are that life skills track. We have worked with high functioning students that are on the college track, so we see them all. One of the things that I'm most proud of is helping students to make connections and then working on those independent living skills. So that's kind of my background. I'll pass it over to Kim.
I'm Kim Alexander. I'm the accessibility specialist at Lincoln Land. I've been working in special education for 25 years, everything from kindergarten through now college. And I also am an adjunct professor, so I teach classes online and in person at the college as well. So as far as what we're kind of talking about today, I can sort of talk to you a little bit more about the professor perspective as well as what we do in our office.
So with that, we'll just kind of jump in. One of our main focuses today is going to be discussing accommodations that students might receive in the college setting. This would be for any student that has a disability. So a lot of students come to us with the IEP, a 504 plan, or a medical disability of some sort. So we have conversations with a variety of different individuals with a variety of different needs. So we talk about what accommodations are, and really the main gist of it, accommodations are adjustments or supports that remove barriers that a student might face so that they can have equal access to education. We're going to talk a lot about access versus success in this presentation, but just remember that the accommodation is not necessarily meant for success. We have tons of other ways that we can do that, but we're focused on that access piece. They're different from modifications, and this is a big one, especially for students coming out of a K-12 setting or K-22 if they stay on for transitional years. The modifications can tend to fundamentally alter a course or an outcome or an expectation, and our accommodations don't do that. So, for example, in an IEP, let's say a student may have reduced choices on tests. That's not going to be an accommodation that's given in the college setting. So those are some of the kind of differences. We're not quite as I don't want to say all-inclusive, but we're not quite as overreaching as some of the accommodations in high school are. So why are we focusing on Autism Supports? I had somebody ask me this morning how many students that we have on campus that have autism. I can't answer that because not everybody that has autism comes to register to our office, but I think the last count that I saw, we're sitting around 66 students that are registered with us have autism as their primary diagnosis. So why we focus on that is because those students often face unique challenges. They require tailored accommodations. A lot of times it's on that social aspect. A lot of times we're working specifically with time management, or we're working with how to interact or talk with their instructors, talk with peers, any of those. So that's why we tend to focus, and Kim has a really strong background and interest in the autism spectrum and supports. So that's kind of one of the things that we've really tried to take off with this year. So just some things that we're going to talk through today. We're going to take a look at the legal frameworks that kind of guide our decisions and things that we do for accommodations. We're going to talk through some of the effective supports for students with autism that we've seen work firsthand in our classes, in our students. And then we're going to also look at some strategies for self-advocacy and collaboration, because that is one of the big pieces that I think any parent, no matter what their student is able to do, not able to do, they want them to be able to at least speak up and tell somebody that they need something. So the legal frameworks. With K-12 education, if you're coming out of that, you're familiar with FAPE, or Free and Appropriate Education. We are more guided, well, we are completely guided by the Americans with Disabilities Act and Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. Those two pieces guide what we do. Because we receive Title IV funds, that is one of the reasons why we are required to provide accommodations. It's also the human thing to do. But that's kind of the key pieces that are guiding us. FAPE goes away once the student transitions out of the K-12 setting. Students are entitled to reasonable accommodations to ensure equitable access. We're going to talk through what reasonable is. I tell students you can ask for the sun, the moon, and the stars, and I might be able to give you 2 stars. Because sometimes our IEPs are coming in with a ton of accommodations, and we can't do all of those because it would change the nature of our course or the outcomes. So we look at the reasonableness of accommodations. And then disability resources centers, which is kind of that arm of a college that oversees the accommodations. They can be called a variety of names. Like our specific office is called Accessibility Services. Others may be called Disability Resource Centers. So if you're going, doesn't matter where you are going to school, to college, look for something with disability. And usually in the search engines on a college website, you can just type in disability supports and it will get you to the right office, because again, we are called a variety of names. For this presentation today, we're just going to generically call everybody disability resource centers. So the DRCs are hubs for accommodations and support services on campus. Some schools have a myriad of duties that fall under their purview. Some of the DRCs that I've spoken with over the year, they handle all the testing for their college. We don't do that. Our college has us. You're looking at a 2-woman show on about 444 students. I looked at that yesterday. So we have 444 students registered with our office, meaning that all of those students have presented to us with the documentation that would qualify them as a student with disabilities. Not all of them are using accommodations, but all of them have at least been in to talk with us at some point in time and have registered with us. Anything you want to throw in? Not yet. Okay. You got it. Okay, so some common challenges that we see for students with autism. On the academic side, we've talked a little bit briefly about that time management, so those executive functioning difficulties. So time management, organization, we don't typically write an accommodation for that. Extended time on due dates is not something that's easily granted by instructors. It's not something that's easily justified on some things, especially when a student has had the syllabus that has information about due dates the entire semester. So what we try to do is, Kim's really good about setting weekly meetings with students that need that little push. And so she'll meet with them, lay out plans, work through what's in the Canvas shell for this next coming week, kind of try to keep them in line that way. Weekly check-ins, email check-ins.
So a lot of our students are used to having some kind of support, somebody checking in with them every day or a couple times a week, who are making sure that they have, meeting their deadlines, doing their assignments and things. And so they sometimes need that a little bit the first semester. And so, yeah, that's basically what I provide for our students on campus.
We also have a myriad of support services that are available on an academic content side. So Kim tutors a lot in our Math 104 class. So a lot of our students will specifically seek her out because she can teach in different ways to meet what they need. We have, and a lot of schools do and offer this as well, we have peer tutors, we have academic success professionals that do kind of the same thing that Kim can do. We share those responsibilities with different departments within the campus. So I would imagine that a lot of other schools have something similar to that. So the biggest thing that we talk about with students is just come ask. because we can get you the proper support, we can work with you, we can reach out to your instructors with you, we can do a lot of things, but we can't do anything about what we don't know about. So that's one of our big things. And then another thing that we see from really any of our students, our ADHD students, autism students, all of those, the overwhelm from sensory environments. So you get into a classroom, this one's pretty chill. I mean, we're all doing the same thing in here, but you get in a classroom when there's 15, 20 different personalities at play and things going on, and some of our students just flat can't handle it. So that sensory environment, that overwhelm, we would look at maybe noise-canceling headphones. We would look at how fidgets, maybe something that's on a calming thing. Kim's got a whole bunch of fidget things that we just ordered for a sensory group that we're trying to start up. But we see a lot of that. They will go to the commons area, and if one is particularly, I'm thinking of one in general, he stems quite a bit. And you may see him just pacing back and forth in the commons. And so having an understanding from the instructors that sometimes it's just too much for students really helps the situation, to where I had a student one time, he was with me when I was a principal, and he would have meltdowns and he would just go down wherever he was at. And I would tell him, I'm like, you're not gonna sit in the hallway, it's not safe. So the other day we had a lunch and learn, and I said, so-and-so, what did I do? He's like, you left me alone. Yes, I do. And that's what we try to convey to our teachers too. Sometimes you can't do anything. Sometimes you just have to let them process if they're in an overwhelmed state, but try to get them to somewhere that is more quiet, less stimulating, all of those. Anything on that?
I will say I have found, at least feedback from the students, that a lot of students actually really like college better because of the fact that you are kind of on your own timeline. You come in, a lot of our classes are still pretty much lecture-based, and there isn't as much expected interaction, which they like. And so it's a lot more chill. And so they don't have all of that stimulus that maybe they had in a high school classroom or in the hallways in a high school. So sometimes actually I found that the sensory environment is sometimes better for students at the college level.
And one of the things that we would encourage students to do that have sensory needs is to find some place that would work for them and know where they can go in the event that they just need to chill. We have a third office next to our suite of offices, I guess I'd say, that we are turning into a sensory room. We're going to get some different lighting options in there. We're going to have some different seating, some flexible seating options. We've got a sound machine. We've got fidgets and a spirograph and just things that are going to be able to help a student regulate themselves. So I would highly encourage students to just know where their safe place can be if they need it in times of an overwhelming. Social challenges, we see this a lot. We see this a lot from our guys especially. They have a difficult time navigating the social interactions, group work, just trying to find their people, as we like to say. They have a hard time with that. Not to say the girls don't, but it seems like we see a lot more of the guys. The guys tend to come around and be like, how do I get a girlfriend? You talk to your parents. No. Hopefully you paid attention in health class. I mean, I don't know. But we do try to make some interaction. I won't say we force interaction, but we do try to provide opportunities for students to interact with one another. We have several instances where there's misunderstandings of unwritten social rules. Unfortunately, sometimes, especially for our guys, again, I don't want to pick on our guys, but some of our guys, when they're bigger and they lack some of the social skills, and they come up and they approach somebody and they don't know what to say, so maybe they just come and do one of these. And it's a little bit threatening, it's a little bit intimidating, they come across wrong, they're not able to read those social cues. So we are trying to set up we call it Link Up. So we are trying to encourage students to come meet with each other, meet different people within the college community. We've got different activities that we're working on that way. So there are a ton of activities that go on our campus. There's a ton of activities that go on any campus. And our students with these challenges don't know how to navigate those social settings. So we will go with them on some. I went with a student to the bookstore the other day to get his cap and gown. And as we're walking back up, we're just kind of walking, talking. And as we get to a group of people that he knew, a couple of them, he stops. And I'm like, well, I don't need to stand here. He's talking. He's doing okay. So I go on up the stairs. I go to my office. I see his portfolio bag still in my office. And I thought, he won't remember to come get that. Sure enough, about 10 minutes later, here he comes. And he's got this smile, and he's just giggly, and he's never giggly. He's like kind of like the surly bear of the group, and he's giggly. And I'm like, what is going on? You are awfully giggly, giddy today. And he shuts my door, and it's kind of loud, and he goes, how do I get a girlfriend? And I said, are you meaning like the one you were just flirting with downstairs? Yeah. So we had conversation of just some general, how can he start a conversation with her? And we kind of use those as coaching moments of if she's not coming back with an immediate response, maybe take that as your cue. So explicitly explaining some of those situations. So that's kind of how we try to handle social challenges.
Just to kind of add to that, yeah, with the social piece, and I think just adulting in general, I do a lot of coaching with students, just kind of working through any issues that they happen to be having, whether it's with other people, with making friends, with, whatever. So, if your student's not coming to our campus, but another campus, if they do have like counseling services, things like that, that could be someone that they could reach out to also.
And then we see them facing the emotional challenges, just that overall anxiety and stress. Yeah, I see some faces that are like, yeah, that's big. But anxiety, stress from transitions, new environments, and think about how often they're changing environments. Their days are not necessarily the same. They don't go to the same, like in high school, they don't go to the same 8 class periods every day. So now we're moving between a Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Tuesday, Thursday. We have all of those things. A class might be scheduled or canceled unexpectedly, and that throws the whole day in a spin. So there's a lot of anxiety and stress from that. One of the things that we try to coach students through is take a minute, reorient yourself to your day, and move forward. And that has helped a little bit. I know on my good friend, as I call him, he was really struggling with transitions between mod classes. We have classes that run on 8 weeks. So he was in some classes that would go all semester. He was in classes that would only go the first 8 weeks, and then he'd switch to another class. And trying to relearn an instructor or relearn a group of people was really sending him into a tailspin. So one of the things that we tried to do with him is go through and anticipate what problems he might have, how we could handle those problems instead of the meltdowns that we would sometimes see from him. And really, I think it's because he's not in a specific class this semester or this mod, he's doing a lot better. But I think that maturity's coming through. He's getting used to, he knows that he can't control everything. He can't always control that he can't control everything, but he's working through some of those. So those are some of the things that we see on an emotional side.
I think just as a parent too, anytime that you can anticipate those changes and the changes in routine, and you know your child best, so you're going to know which things are going to be more likely to trigger them, but anticipating those changes in routine and trying to kind of talk to them about it or prepare them for it. I mean, just as you probably did in elementary school and middle school and high school, it's the same at the adult age.
We do tend to see that it is a little heightened at the start of the semester because it is completely new, even if they're returning students to our campus. So working through their schedules, knowing where their classrooms are, maybe even trying to schedule meetings with instructors ahead of time. Those are the kinds of things that we suggest, especially for our students that we know might struggle a little bit more on that social side. So the process, what do we need to do what we need to do? So the DRCs provide those accommodations and supports for eligible students with disabilities. It is the student's responsibility, not the parents, not the students, not the schools. It is a student's responsibility to self-disclose their disability and the need for accommodations. Again, we say this over and over and over. We can't help you if we don't know you. We can't help if we don't know that you need help. So that's where our students have to come tell us what they need.
We do have a lot of students who just expect that the school has sent their paperwork to us. They don't recognize, because there's always kind of been someone else doing all of that for them through school and doing that paperwork, that they have to take on that responsibility. So it's really important as a parent to know that you have to make sure that your student gets that done.
Yeah, we ran into an instance in January with an early grad from high school, and she started taking classes and assumed that her IEP had just transferred over and that everything in it was going to be the same thing that she had in college, and she did not do well. We didn't know about her until it was too late, because she was in a program that had a grade requirement to keep moving through the modules within the class. So we can't help if we don't know, and unfortunately that was a whole communication error. Except we are really trying to do the outreach with our special ed transition specialists. So for the parents on any situation, if you have somebody in your high school or somebody in your college that you can talk to about what this process looks like, I would highly recommend that. Especially if you're coming out of high school, and you're involved in a special education system somehow, there's likely somebody that's dedicated for transition. So make sure that you got in contact with them so that they can provide the information that you need going forward. Eligibility for services, we have to go through and make sure that it comes from a licensed or credentialed evaluator, school psychologist, school social worker, medical documentation. We have things that come in from psychiatrists. We have things on the mobility side that come in from occupational therapists. We basically need something that lists the diagnosis, and we do vet those. We get some that look pretty sketch. And it looks like mom just kind of, and I say mom because, I'm sorry, dads just usually don't, that mom might have made on a Word document and try, that's just how some of the systems are. So we do a lot of vetting on those. I'm sure others do as well. We need something that has that clear diagnostic statement and then a description of barriers. We're going to sit down and talk with the student, the parents, whoever comes in and sits down with us. We're going to talk through what the strengths of that student are, what the barriers are, what they've really struggled with in past classes. And we're going to try to talk through a plan for that. But we do need to have something that says this is the diagnostic or the diagnosis, or this is the eligibility area for an IEP or whatever. And the piece of that I'm going to reiterate it later, but I'm going to say right now, is that just because a student is found eligible for accommodations does not mean that they're eligible for any program area. Because there may be other physical requirements, there may be other academic requirements. So just because a student has a disability and has been found eligible for accommodations with us does not grant them eligibility for just everything. It's not a carte blanche system. Hey, look, I got that in there. So how are accommodations determined? Again, we look at things that can help mitigate a barrier. So think in terms of our deaf students. The barrier is they can't hear. The solution is we look at sign language interpreter. We look at captioning services. We look at things that are going to take away that unequal access to our content, to our curriculum. So it's got to be a barrier that's presented by that functional limitation, but again, we're not going to compromise those essential outcomes, those essential expectations of a course. It's not going to modify the content of the course in any way. And I liken this to direct instruction classes in a high school versus general education. So in direct instruction, that is taught at the student's academic ability level, whereas general education is taught at grade level. So we can accommodate and modify to get a student successful through a grade level course, but it's changing the course. So think about it in terms of that. We won't do anything that's going to compromise the outcome of a class. Anything on that one? So this whole process, and this is a system that every school will go through, is called an interactive process, meaning the documentation is brought to us, we review, we decide what we would offer as accommodations, we have the conversation. We can also make suggestions for classes based on the information that comes to us. If a student has a very, very high cognitive and academic achievement ability, but maybe the social isn't there, yeah, they're going to be able to do any classwork, But if it's a class that has a ton of group work, they're going to struggle mightily with that. So we look at those kinds of things. So that interactive process helps us to get to know what the students need, to know what has worked in the past, to take a look at the classes that they're contemplating or already enrolled in. So we look at all of those things through this process. So for us and for most DRCs, we again review the previous accommodations that are brought to us in an IEP or whatever document, but we don't guarantee that all of that will be implemented. We discuss the accommodations that are going to be addressing specific needs and that could be helpful. And then we discuss the difference between accommodations that provide access and then the ways that we can help them to seek success. So that's a big thing. We have to mitigate that barrier and the access portion of this. So when we have a student that comes in, again, remember, sun, the moon, the stars, and we might be able to give 2 or 3 stars, then we look at the reasonableness and we write basically a denial of why this is not being offered. I typically do that in a follow-up email that says, hey, thanks for coming in. Here's your approved accommodations based on what we talked about and what you asked for. This one didn't really fly, and that's pretty much the end of it. We don't get too many that I would say are just out there. Some, but not too bad. But we do look at the reasonableness. Our office also handles the Title IX pregnant students, and that's where we see a lot of the unreasonable come in. I'm pregnant, I need extensions on everything. No, sorry, can't do that. You're pregnant. If you have a pregnancy-related reason that you need to miss a due date or whatever, then we talk. So those are the kinds of things that we have to consider for reasonableness. If we have a student that, let's take seizures, for example. Somebody that has seizures may take upwards of 2 days to recover from a seizure. It's not reasonable, I guess, to deny them that they shouldn't have extended time when that happens. The thing that I ask them to do is communicate with somebody that they've had a seizure and that they're down. And then we can also help facilitate that. So it's the same thing with any of our students and our autistic students as well. As long as you can communicate a need, we can consider the reasonableness and help work through that.
One of the things just on reasonableness, particularly with students on the spectrum, sometimes one of the things that we see is that they get study guides and things like that. We cannot ask the professors to provide those things for the students. There are other things that maybe we can put in place to help them. There are supports and tutoring that can help them. There are other ways to kind of meet that need and help them be more successful, but that's not an accommodation that we can necessarily provide.
One of our autistic friends met me in the hallway the other day, and he says, hey, I got to show you this. And he was all excited. And I said, sure, what's up? And so he pulls out his laptop, and he is using Quizlet. He says, my teacher showed me how to do this. I'm going to upload my notes that I've taken on a Google Doc or whatever. We use Word. So I'm going to take my notes, and I'm going to upload it, and I'm going to tell it to make me flashcards. And he was super excited about that. So we work with students to help kind of give some of those strategies to where they're not as dependent on somebody else providing everything for them. Oh, there we go. So this is not right. It's not wrong. It's just what it is. So in this picture, in the K-12 environment, we tend to do, as the adults, we tend to do a lot of the heavy lifting for students. It's not right, it's not wrong, it's just kind of the nature of how we roll. They're our babies. We don't want to see them fail. We know that they have a need. We want to help them. We want to make them independent, but sometimes we have to get things done. So that's where it becomes more of that, I'll just pick you up, I'll do the heavy lifting. Whereas when they get to college and into the independent world, we're more on the corgi side of we're providing that ramp or that scaffolding to help them be successful.
What I tell the new students, incoming freshmen, is that we are preparing you for work, and so your boss is not going to do your job for you. They may be able to provide some help in doing your job, but you're going to have to be your own secretary. You're going to have to do things a little bit more yourself at the college level.
So some effective accommodations that we have used with students. Classroom supports, we have priority seating. A lot of times that's not sitting up front by the instructor. That might be sitting in the back to where if they are overwhelmed, they can leave quietly without interrupting everybody. So we may try to place them next to somebody that is aware of their needs. Sometimes we'll take a look at class rosters. We don't disclose anything really, but we might try to facilitate an introduction with that student and somebody else in the class so that they might have a go-to person. We also provide access to lecture recordings or written materials. We use a program called Otter AI, and it is an online recording and transcription service that when the student goes into a lecture-based class, they can turn it on. It will start recording everything. It will actually transcribe right there in front of them too. We use it for some of our deaf students if we're in a pinch for interpreters. And then it will, at the end, summarize everything and provide a notes outline for them. So we're using this with a variety of students, but especially for our neurodivergent students that just maybe can't focus on something or having a rough time and missing content, this is a way to still continue with that.
On the parent side, particularly from the autism perspective, because auditory processing is often such an issue, this is one that I do often recommend to students because they may not catch everything that the instructor is saying, and they need to be able to go back and hear it again, or maybe see it in writing if that is more how they process information. So my daughter is on the spectrum, and this was huge for her.
My favorite thing to tell students with that, though, is you can't just turn it on and kick your feet back and relax. It's not necessarily going to get every single piece exactly right, exactly the way that the instructor means it. So it's not meant to replace what you're doing, as some of them like to try. It's meant to supplement that. Some testing accommodations, these probably aren't too different than what students might already be experiencing. Extended time on exams. We also recommend quiet or separate testing. In our specific, and I think a lot of colleges are like this, in our specific setting, we have a testing center. Our instructors can work with the students, and if it's a lab practical, let's say, and the student has extended time, they don't necessarily send those to the testing center, they just do them at a different time. So we encourage students to work with their instructors about don't just send your accommodations letters out to your instructors, really have a conversation, and if you need help facilitating that conversation, then we will do that. So our testing kind of looks in a variety of different ways. We offer tests read, again, maybe not because reading comprehension, but just for that focus and to keep them moving along so that they can finish even with an extended amount of time. So testing accommodations are probably pretty similar no matter where your student might enroll. Sensory supports, I've kind of mentioned these already, the noise canceling headphones. This isn't just for autistic students. I had a student in this morning that has a traumatic brain injury and has some vision issues. And one of the things that he's specifically asking for from his funding source is noise canceling headphones so that he can still continue to focus, especially in a class where, let's take a graphic design class where it's not all lecture-based and some of it is work-based and production-based, that he can still stay in the classroom, seek help when he needs to, but not have all that background noise coming in. So those are some of the things that we have found to be helpful. And then communication supports, alternative formats for participation. We are big, and I say we because it's Kim and I, and we're trying to get everybody else on the Universal Design for Learning train, but we are really big proponents of that, don't expect everybody to be pigeonholed in the same little way and to really consider how students can demonstrate what they know. So that's one of the things that we have reached out to a lot of our instructors. We're small, so we can do that. I know some of the bigger universities may not be like emailing every instructor, but I guarantee you that we see probably half of our instructors every week just walking by our office.
I think too, this is where working with our office and us knowing the instructors and being able to recommend instructors comes in very handy because some of our instructors are more flexible. And if your child is going to another university, ask around, ask the Disability Services Center, look online before they pick those classes with those instructors. Yeah, let's not.
But Kim is exactly right. The next piece that we'll talk about is why it's important to involve the DRCs in your initial process, in kind of every step of the way for a student that has a disability or needs, because just like she said, we can make those recommendations. A lot of times our advisors will be sitting in, I apologize, I keep hitting this. A lot of times our advisors will have a student in and they'll just know by the interaction that, I wonder if there's something else that's needed here. So if we have the documentation, we can look through it and we can already know that, oh yeah, math's gonna be a real struggle for this student. We need to look at X instructor, or we need to make sure that we take them down to the math center, or that they know that the peer tutors are available. So we have those kinds of conversations all the time with our advisors because we tend to have a little bit more of the inside information. And then there's others that we have no clue because we haven't met, we haven't had the documentation sent over, but we tend to know a few other questions that can ask to start getting some of that conversation going about what might be their preferred learning style. Because just on the opposite side of that, we have a lot of students that we say, oh, you're gonna need a little bit more flexibility, maybe you should take this student. We have others that can't stand that an instructor is like, do whatever, here's your info, and they need it X, Y, and Z, and it's due at 12 or 11:59, and it's always due on Wednesdays, and they need that regimented structure so we can make those kind of accommodations, or I'm sorry, those recommendations as well. We tend to like to sit in so that schedules don't get completely out of balance and that a student gets completely overwhelmed from the start. We have some that with Division of Rehabilitation Services funding, they want them to have 12 credit hours a semester. That gets to be tough because that's 4 classes most of the time. That's a lot. And especially if they're first time coming in and if they're taking a math and an English and a heavy science, and that's gonna just completely do them in, we don't want to look at those.
I will say too that if it is a student who has a lot of anxiety, who does struggle with transitions, it is a really good idea to look at kind of gradually ramping up the number of classes. I know my daughter, when she started at Lincoln Land, started with 2 classes, and then every semester just kind of built on that and got up to full time. It took a few semesters though. So, just kind of being aware that jumping it with 2 feet may not be the most successful process for the student, and not being afraid to, kind of go easy that first semester if you think that they might need it.
A lot of times students will think, oh, I had 8 classes every day in high school. I can do 4. Yes, but if we don't get the right 4, it may not go well. So those are the kinds of things that we look at with students. We also have a couple of introductory courses that we recommend for some of our students, and actually Kim teaches one of them for us, so that works out really well for a lot of our students. Our college success skills or our first year experience. If you have a student that is what I call that bubble kid, and that they are just on that verge of being able to fly independently and need some support, then I would definitely look at one of these type of classes in whatever school that you're in, because it kind of is a refresher on just how to student and how to navigate the system, because everything is so piece-based, I guess I want to call it. You meet with your advisor and they do this for you, and you meet with a tutor and they do this for you, but then you have to do financial aid and you go meet with this person. Or if you need to register for accommodations, then you go back here. So there's all these different pieces that become super hard to navigate, whereas with our darlings, we like to wrap them. We like to make handoffs. We like to make sure that they get what they need in terms of whatever they're working on. We have several that come in for, right now is a big time for Division of Rehabilitation Services paperwork. They need the tuition bill, the book list, the award letters. They need all of those. And our students, even though it's all at their fingertips in our Logger Central system, they don't know where to access it. So just helping to navigate that process is kind of alleviating a barrier in itself.
And I will say, I can't speak for all community colleges, I can only speak for us. We are very involved and very there for our students when it comes to things like that, the extras. I do know both of my students are transitioning to other universities, or both my children are transitioning to other universities in the fall, and it is much different at a bigger college. And so that might be something to also be aware of, is that, if your child needs that support, if they're not completely independent, you may need to be more involved in helping them make sure that they're jumping through those hoops, or maybe community college.
And speaking of jumping through hoops, I don't know if it's the next one. No, but we'll touch on it here. Speaking of jumping through hoops, when your student goes to college, you kind of become, as parents, kind of become non-existent unless they sign the FERPA form that allows you to have access to really anything that you might need. So for students that need that help, I would strongly recommend that they ask for a release of information form from the records office or send an email. Our website specifically has how you can do that from an email. And then the student can request that information be given to so-and-so, and it can be financial records only, or it can be all academic records. It can be any of those. So I would definitely recommend that. For those that might have guardianship of a student, that kind of usurps the FERPA, but it still wouldn't be a bad idea because it's literally probably just a piece of paper. And if you do have guardianship, then you will probably need to provide the court documents issuing the guardianship, so that way the college knows that they can legally release information to you. Okay, so Division of Rehabilitation Services, this is a big one. So if anybody does not have a case, is everybody familiar with this that's in the room? Okay, so we won't go too in-depth for those of you that might be online. I will cover just a few things, but the Division of Rehabilitation Services can assist with basically anything under that employment or education and training umbrella for students. And for college students, it is most notably in the form of financial assistance. So one of the things with that is once you have a case with Division of Rehabilitation Services and they have been made aware that you're planning to attend training, they can look at different factors like your high school GPA, what your vocational goal is it feasible, is it reasonable for you to accomplish this? And then they can agree to sponsor what financial aid does not cover. The FAFSA is the huge starting piece for this. Once you get your case established, they can't do anything without the FAFSA. So if you have not filled out a FAFSA for the 25-26 school year and you have a student going, you want to make sure you do that. And that 25-26 is open now, and it will use your 2023 tax information. FAFSA is going back to an October 1st open date for the 26-27 school year, and that will use your 24 taxes. So FAFSA is a huge piece because with Division of Rehabilitation Services, as I mentioned, they can, at a community college and moving into universities now, they're funding more of a university experience for students too. They can cover what financial aid does not pay for. Books, tuition, supplies, tools. We have students going into our automotive program that have $6,000 worth of tools, a Matco toolbox, all that kind of stuff. Financial aid's only going to pay a portion of that. The rest of it would have to come out of the student's pocket, but if they have a case with Division of Rehabilitation Services and they've agreed to sponsor, they will pay the rest. Now, that is dependent upon them getting all of the information that they need, so work with your counselor to get what is this doing? I don't know what I did. Sweet. Okay. So for those of you that might find the presentation online, then we have information linked here for the Division of Rehabilitation Services general information page. And then underneath that is the referral link, because your student may have left high school or leaving high school with an open case with Division of Rehabilitation Services. If that is not the case and your student is already out but thinking about going to college, then I would strongly recommend finding this. You can even just Google DRS self-referral, and it will bring you to the link. And then you can fill out, it's just basic demographic information, and the counselor, it will go through their system, and the counselor for your area will reach out to finish opening that case. Again, they will need information of documentation of the disability. Oh, there's a self-referral. So some self-advocacy strategies. Start early, start often. If your student is potentially college-bound, take some of those accommodations away in high school. Because, again, sun, the moon, the stars, they're going to get 2 to 3 stars. And I say that, metaphorically, because they might get more than that. But start early to create that independence, to start weaning them away from that reliance on basically anything else but themselves. Some of them are not going to be able to do that, and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But then that's where the conversation has to come into play of what is best for this student. We don't want to see our students at frustration level all the time. We want to see them live at independent level. Maybe not as high as what we want them to be, but at least at independent level without complete frustration. Understand your rights. So learn the accommodations process at whatever school that your student will be attending. Because as much as they're the same, everybody's got their own little nuance of how to do this differently. For example, we use, it's called clockwork. Each school might have a different system that they use for their accommodations housing. Our students can make an online referral for themselves and upload their documents and all that kind of stuff. We don't push that because, again, we're small and we want to meet these students. We want to know them. We would prefer that they bring their documentation into us so that we can have that conversation.
I will say at bigger universities, most of that is an online process. So they require, like I know U of I requires that they go through the online form and submit everything there first before they can meet with disability services.
So again, just kind of figure out what it is for the process for the school that you're going to be attending. Communicate with faculty and staff. Have your students start writing practice emails. Provide potential situations. You missed an assignment. How would you ask your instructor for an extension? You're not going to be in class. How would you let them know? And help have those conversations and help guide that information that they're going to be putting out there so that it's in a tone that is respectable. I mean, and this is just with all students. I got one 2 days ago when I came over to her office and I'm like, listen to this. And this student said, here's my letter. How do I get my accommodations tomorrow morning? You probably don't. It takes a little bit of time.
On that note, one of the big things I think between high school and college is as parents, maybe you're used to being that facilitator for your child and you're used to sending the emails to the teacher if they have specific needs. At the college level, all of that communication really needs to come from the student directly. And also don't use their email address and pretend to be them and email the instructor. We've seen that. Try to have your child be the director. They need to do it. If they need help writing that email, you can do it. They can, if they're at Lincoln Land, they can come to me. I do that a lot, quite often with students. How do I say this? What do I say to the instructor? There are people on staff somewhere on campus, no matter where they are, that can help them write an email. But they need to do it themselves.
My favorite story for this one is it's been a few years ago, but when I had a student that was emailing me and starts the message. Now, granted, I've been Mrs. Reiman to these students for years. Starts the message with, Randi, I need to do blah, 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 blah. And I was like, okay, Mom. I don't think this is my student emailing me. So yes, please don't hack your students' accounts and email. I'm not saying that you don't necessarily need some of their account information because they'll forget it or because they have no idea how to access some of it. Not advocating for that at all, but you may need to do something. Just don't hijack everything is I guess where I'm going with that. Yeah, help. Make sure that, again, we've talked about so many different resources that are available at most colleges. So make sure that your students know who to turn to, even if it's just that one person that when they are having an issue, they can go plop down in their office and vent it all out. Or if they don't know where to turn to, then that person can help get them to the next person that would be able to help them. So build those relationships and then basically having a student try to stay as proactive and organized as possible. So start early with those processes too.
I think that is also a huge one as a parent. For students, there's so much more staff, so much more going on at the college level, so many different departments that they are now suddenly aware of. It is very overwhelming, and so it's important that they do maybe have one person that they can go to and ask, this is my issue, what do I need to do, or how do I solve this? And so, yeah, even if your child does not have very high needs as far as accommodations and things, sometimes having met with a disability services person, that's their go-to person, and that person can really help them navigate, especially like those first few weeks of classes.
And we've just talked about that. Find their people. So beyond the classroom, some things that we don't, we're trying to do some different things. There's going to be one on housing, and we don't have a lot to offer on that. But for social skills supports, encourage your students to get involved with whatever they can. For us, we have welcome week activities. We have something going on in our commons almost weekly that students can just go sit down, drop in at. It's an activity. They can get to know people. They don't necessarily find that very comforting, or they're not comfortable doing it, so we will go out and kind of try to make some of those connections with them. We've started our link up sensory breaks, where we've got specific times set aside each week that we're trying to entice students to come, again, meet their people. We've got some things that we're going to try to work out differently with that for next year, including our location and our time, but there are things like this going on in so many different campuses.
I think one of the things for my children, as they're moving off and away from Lincoln Land and going to be more independent, I am really going to encourage as much as I can that they get involved in some type of club, because they will have kind of a shared interest, and that just builds that network right off the bat. And it's just easier for them to interact with other students that they have something in common with.
So I don't have a presenter thing. I'm just using a mouse, and that's why it does weird things. So housing accommodations. Like I said, we can't speak to this very much because we're a commuter campus. We're a community college. We do not have any housing. Kim can speak to it on a parent side, but some of the things that, especially to consider for students with sensory issues, would be single rooms, quiet housing options. That might not be for sensory needs. It might just be because they don't like people in general.
Yeah, I do know, as at the university level, there are definitely options for housing. My child on the spectrum is going to have a single room. There is absolutely no way that she needs to have a safe space when she gets to campus, but she's going to be in a suite, so like she will have roommates and other people close by that she will have to learn to live with, but still kind of have that safe space. So I think looking at what options your campus has and what would be best for your child, maybe it's not living on campus, maybe it does need to be some other option, but see what they have, because they may have something that will work out really well.
And one of the last things to think about beyond the classroom is how does the student become career ready? Yes, we have the classroom training, we have the skill training, but how do they become how do they get those employability skills? We have a specific employability skills class that we recommend to a lot of our students. We also have a career services center that can focus on like job coaching, not so much going to a job. A lot of the post-secondaries won't do that, but if you have Division of Rehabilitation Services or some other agency that helps with job coaching and that personal support on the job, then that's an option. But we work pretty closely with our career services to help students do their resumes, do their cover letters, practice interviews, some of those kinds of things, the career interest inventories, because sometimes they're just taking classes because their parents want them to, because they think it's the next step. They really don't have a focus on what they're going to do. So we have a lot of different options within the career readiness realm as well. So have your students take advantage of that. Anything on that one? Okay, so Kim's got, whoops, I did not want to do that. Kim's got some additional resources here, and I'll let her kind of touch base on a little bit of those.
I'll be really quick so that we have time for questions. So yeah, obviously we've talked about seeking out the Disability Resources Center, and then the Organization for Autism Research has some really nice guides online for that students can use to kind of help prepare for college, particularly if they're going away to school. If you're looking for specific, like kind of special programs, maybe your child needs a lot more support, the College Autism Network is a really, really good website to check out. There are a ton of really good programs across the country, schools that have a lot of supports kind of built in on campus for autistic students, so definitely check that out. Association for Autism and Neurodiversity, I highly, highly recommend them as a resource. They do offer online support groups, which is really great. They offer a lot of things for young adults. Like I said, they're out of Massachusetts, so it's all online for anyone that's here in Illinois. But it's a really, really good resource to check out. Also, they have a lot of things that they offer for parents as well. So definitely check that out. And then the books that we've got listed here are both, I would say, probably more kind of for students to read themselves. I mean, it's not a bad thing for parents to be aware of, but I see a lot of students that come to us that have really, they've spent a lot of time masking and trying to be someone else for their parents, for their teachers, for whoever. And they're coming to me as an adult who wants to kind of, be their own person and be independent. And so it's really important that they learn how to do that. And so we spend a lot of time kind of talking through how to, find your own people and, being yourself and things like that, being more comfortable with who you are as an autistic person. The Divergent Mind is a little bit more general based on neurodivergent, but it is very focused on girls and women. So it's a really good resource if you have daughters.
All right, so that brings us to you guys and what questions you have. I'm going to go ahead and put up the closing number so that way if any, and actually our contact information, this goes to our general accessibility services contact email and phone number that is shared by Kim and I. She tends to do more on the email side with that, and I tend to do more on the phone calls that come in because she usually has students. So it works out well. But that's our information. Even if we're not specific to your community college or where your student's going to go, we are happy to answer any questions that we might be able to for you. So with that, I'll leave the checkout code up here, and if you have questions, we'll be around. Yeah. It is. Yeah. Very much so. So the question is how do we determine what is reasonable on an accommodations? Is there a grading rubric? Is there something? A lot of it comes down to what classes the student is enrolled in, what the expectation is for that class. Let's take a nursing program, for example. They can, per state standards, they cannot miss more than X number of classes. They have to have a 75%. So it's not reasonable in that case to say, oh, the student has related absences, it doesn't matter how much they miss, you're going to excuse them all. We can't, because then they're not meeting the expectation of the course. So no, there's no grading rubric. We do take a look at what is needed for each individual course. The other piece that I'll throw in on that, and then I'll turn it over to Kim, is that when we look at reasonable, it's not necessarily a blanket statement of what works in this class is going to work in this class, and what's going to work this semester is going to work next semester. So that is why we don't necessarily say that our students have to come back and meet with us for each semester. A lot of them do, but it is important that they are still communicating with their instructors and sending their accommodations letters out each semester. And if we do have a case where there are higher needs, then we do want to meet with them so that we can look at what could be reasonable and feasible for each class.
I was just going to say, I think the thing to kind of keep in mind with the accommodations and reasonableness is that we have to follow ADA and college's preparation for the workforce. So really when we're looking at accommodations, we're kind of looking at like accommodations that would be reasonable sort of in a workplace environment as well, ultimately. So like, for example, if a student needs to, record a meeting so that they can process that information later, like that's probably a reasonable accommodation in an office, It's probably not a reasonable expectation that their boss is going to take notes for them, So, things like that, trying to, build that independence, but also kind of giving those supports that they need that would be reasonable for what they're doing without it being too much for whatever it is they're being asked to do.
Good question. I don't know how we would monitor who's online if they have questions.
I don't know, all time's up,
So, anything else? Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and like I said, feel free to reach out. If we can't help you specifically, if you're not coming to Lincoln Land, we can maybe find out who to put you in touch with wherever you are going.